Now, if you listen to that first record, I mean, it sounds like someone found it buried in their backyard.
Hi, I'm Leah Greenblatt, and this is EW's Stories Behind the Songs. I'm here with the Black Keys, Dan Auerbach, and Patrick Carney. You have 8 originals, right? 5 covers. When you're doing it at that level, do you need to get permission for all of those covers? What's the legal aspect of that when you're just 2 guys in Akron?
Yeah, when we made the big come up, we didn't really know anything about making an album. So we didn't know how to go about putting a cover on the record.
We had a 1-page contract for our first record, and Pat's aunt was a lawyer.
She didn't really look at it for us, but we we did a bunch of covers on that first record, and we had no idea how to do it. We just sent the record to Alive Records, Patrick at Alive, and he sorted it out. It turns out that I think you can just do a cover as long as you're not changing the lyrics. And even then, you could probably say it's a parody, and then you probably get to keep the publishing money. We should have just done some parodies. We should have just been like, I don't know, weird keys. When we were growing up in Ohio, one of the most famous musicians when we were kids was the polka king Frankie Yankovic.
Huge star. Northeastern Ohio.
Still, when we were kids, it was just polka everywhere.
What was the sum total of your gear mostly?
We made the record on this thing called an Akai DSP-16. It was a digital 16 track that we got from Sam Ash or something on a credit card. And then we bought this pack of like microphones that were these Chinese mics that were garbage. And Dan bought a mic that was like a condenser mic, another Chinese piece of crap. And the only way we could get the stuff to sound right was to plug it into this Maestro fuzz pedal that we had. And so when we were doing the vocals, we'd either put them through, Dan would sing through an amplifier sometimes, or we would sing through this guitar pedal, just a little bit of fuzz. We did a lot of different experimenting just to try to make the recording sound
trashy in the right way.
Yeah,
that was really important to us.
Coloring the sound was really hard to do back then on the digital equipment, and we couldn't afford like a 16 or 8 track or something. So the logical thing was to do this digital recording, but it sounded so sterile that we spent the whole time just making things trying to get it to sound crunchy. Now, if you listen to that first record, I mean, it sounds like it was like someone found it buried in their backyard.
I always remembered, I think it was the 9 Inch Nails Hurt video where they had the footage and they thought it looked too clean, so they literally took it out to the parking lot and ran over it.
Yeah.
And then they were like,
exactly that.
I heard
exactly.
I heard that Keith Richards like paid someone to wear his jacket. What if like people paid us just to drag their records behind their car?
I want to talk about your brother for a second, Pat. Did he sort of on purpose or accidentally become your art director?
He did all of our record covers up until this most recent one, Dropout Boogie. But yeah, it was intentional, but accidental. I mean, when Michael became the art director, because when we made a demo, Dan said we should make a cover. My brother was going to art school, so we had him throw something together. So logically, when we signed with the Live Records, the owner, Patrick, was a graphic designer, and he did a cover that was pretty good, but my brother tweaked it, and it was better. So Thick Freakness is the first record that Michael did all on his own. And to come up with the cover of that record, we needed the record to come out in spring, and we decided to sign to Fat Possum like in December of 2002. And they basically said, if you can get us everything by like December 15th, we can have the record ready to come out. So we made the record and we had to do a cover, and there was literally, we didn't have any idea. My brother Mike and I drove to the Super Kmart in Akron at like 1 a.m, and we're just walking through the store looking for inspiration of what we could put on the cover. And I saw the jar of Royal Crown hair pomade, and we bought it. And then we did a little photo shoot in my apartment, and Michael scanned it and like that changed.
Perfect.
He made that cover in like 2 days.
I love that album cover. It's one of my favorites.
It's so viscous looking.
Yeah, it's my hand in the pomade there.
So you're like David Duchovny in Zoolander. You're a former hand model.
I'm a former hand model. Yeah. And I also only wear Dare Leak.
Add that to the Wikipedia.
And is the 14 hours true that it really was that recorded that quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's over. It was like Thick Freakness. I think there's 3 songs that were recorded on a 4-track over the summer. Oh my God, I'm trying to remember the songs on it. I Cry Alone, and then If You See Me Coming, and Everywhere I Go. We're all done on this antiquated Audio Technica 4-track, which is like a 200-pound beast of a cassette 4-track, but it sounds amazing. If you ever come across one of those, you should maybe consider buying it, because it's the best sounding 4-track I've ever used. But the rest of it, we recorded it on a Tascam 388 little 8-track quarter-inch machine that I got off of eBay. One of the coolest little things, I read that this guy East River Pipe made his records on one of those, and I was digging a lot of merge stuff at the time, so I bought one, and it was very easy to use, and so we made that record in one day. I put all the files into this digital recorder so I could like recall the mixes. It made it sound much worse. But I would like, Dan was just moving into a house with his girlfriend that weekend, so like I would like make a mix and then drive it over to his house, and then go home, and he would call the phone and be like, "Turn the guitar up," and I remix it and drive it back over. It's pre email, really, like pre being able to send a song.
CDRs.
So I drive it back, and okay, that's good. Do the next one. And then I like mix it and drive it back over. So I think of that 14 hours, like at least 5 hours would be driving to Dan's house.
This record, you toured with Beck when he did his Sea Change tour, right? And
yeah.
Sea Change is such a specific kind of record. Was his audience for that receptive to you guys?
Oh yeah, that was a really big. We just were talking about that touring with Beck. The way that came about was really kind of crazy. I met Beck in 1996. My uncle Ralph was a musician, and he was friends with this guy Smokey Hormel, who was touring with Beck on the Odelay tour, and I was really into that record, and my uncle got me on the backstage list. So I went backstage and to see him after he played the Odeon in Cleveland, and I was 16 years old, and here it was my first time meeting like a rock star, and he was standing backstage with a bowl of fruit and was like, "Would you like a pear?" And of course, like I go back to high school and I was like, "Oh yeah, we were like hanging out with Beck." So then fast forward to like 2003, we're on tour with Sleater Kinney, and we're playing the Roseland Ballroom in New York. And after the show, Janet comes back and says, "Do you want to go to the SNL after party?" And of course, we're like, "Absolutely, we want to do that." I was like, "How'd you get us on?" Like, "Well, Beck played, and Beck put us on the list." So we tagged along, and we go to some lame bar in Midtown Manhattan, and we can't afford a single drink. So we're just like picking up the drinks off the table that people had just left. And Chris Kattan, I remember he walked up to me and he's like, "Are you just like drinking old drinks?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I can't afford drinks." He's like, "Can I hang out with you?" We just started hanging out. And then I ran up to Beck and I was like, a little bit buzzed. I was like, hey, I actually met you, a couple times. And my uncle's Ralph Carney. And he's like, well, what are you doing here? And I told him about the band, and I just happened to have an advanced promo copy of Thick Freakness in my jacket. And I was like, we're in a band. This record's coming out in a couple weeks. You should check it out. And literally a week later, our booking agent calls us and said, Beck just offered you the whole summer tour. There you go. Dashboard Confessional was on the tour. I just remember at one point asking Beck why he had Dashboard Confessional on the tour. And he's like, I guess I don't know. And then all of a sudden they weren't on the tour anymore. And we played. I do remember playing. Remember we played Red Rocks and we got a standing ovation, and that was really incredible.
And we were in the minivan. It was just the two of us and one other person, but it was hard to keep up with the buses. We were so tired by the time we got there in the afternoon. Every day.
In your little Flintstone car. It's a pretty literal title.
It's very literal. We recorded Rubber Factory at an old General Tire factory that had offices on the second floor. It had been, I don't know when General Tire left Akron, but all the tire companies that you can think of were based in Akron at one point. Firestone, Goodyear, General Tire, BF Goodrich. They all, for some reason, were headquartered in Akron. So,
yeah, we went to Firestone High School.
When we were growing up, we were just surrounded by empty rubber factories. And when it came time to get an actual space, this real estate agent that my mom knew said he could get us into this rubber factory. So we went and checked it out, and it was $500 a month, which I think we had a little sticker shock on that. It was like kind of expensive, but we had access to probably 50,000 square feet. We could do anything we wanted up there.
This giant, frightening building. We were so scared to be there alone at night.
It was fucking
Nobody
terrifying.
wanted to be there alone. It was straight out of a horror film.
So the room we rented,
with the water dripping in the hallway.
Dude, the room we rented was like an 80s remodel office with like really shitty drywall. But if you went around the corner, literally there was an exploded lab. Like literally.
A mad scientist laboratory.
It was like something out of like Rick and Morty. There was like an exploded laboratory with eye wash stations everywhere. And then if you went down this, probably 300, 400 foot long hallway, you could look down, there are holes in the floor, and you could see down that there were still stacks of like ghost tires. Like, do you remember that?
Yeah.
There were like thousands of tires in this floor. It was basically, it was like a haunted house. But I bought a mixing desk off of eBay that belonged to the band Loverboy.
Wow, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, it was $500, and the guy like drove it to my house from Alberta, Red Deer, Alberta, Canada, and he dropped it off, and it was so heavy it took like everybody I knew to lift it up and to take it into there. And when it was a beast. And when we finished making that record, we just left it there. We left it in the building.
It got demolished, yeah.
The building was a super fun site, filled up with asbestos and whatever else. The city tore it down and then didn't have enough money to clean it up. So all the rubble's still there. I bet you could still find the pieces from the desk.
And then is the Rebel, is that that Lonely Boy single cover? Like a photo of that?
No, that's the mall we grew up going to.
Oh, okay. Got it. And then, so Rubber Factory is the first record that charts, right? On the Billboard 200.
I mean, I think it charted like at 195 or something.
This says 143.
Okay.
You should give yourself more credit. But, and I know, obviously you guys had already had a bunch of syncs, but this was Black Snake Moan, there was the Amex commercial. Was there a point when your parents and your friends started to maybe think that you guys were actually like doing this, that you were real musicians and this was a career?
I mean, I think our friends thought that when we toured England, the first couple times. I think that was a big deal. Most people we knew in Akron never even, never got to go overseas, really. So at least my friends, it was a big deal if you went to like France or something. So that was a big deal.
Mhm.
And what about your family? When did they feel like you guys had made it?
I think the Rolling Stone review of Big Come Up was a big thing for us.
Yeah, that was huge. Rolling Stone is like gospel to our parents. You know what I mean? They grew up with it being, absolutely on the cutting edge, and to see us in there was really exciting for them. For us too.
I feel like Chuck Klosterman also wrote something about you guys really early.
Yeah, Chuck mentioned us in Esquire, which is a big deal. Chuck Klosterman used to work at the Akron Beacon Journal, where my dad also worked. So I had been familiar. I met Chuck when I was in high school, and I actually, before we started the band, I was invited and went to his going away party when he got hired as the editor of Spin magazine. And I remember I was wearing like this thrift store leather jacket, and he's like, "Who do you think you are, Julian Casablanca?" I was like, "You prick." But yeah, we've stayed in touch with Chuck, and he's always been a big supporter.
Have you seen Metal Lords? His cameo in Metal Lords? It's on Netflix. The movie.
No, I haven't. I just read his book, The '90s, though. It's really good.
It's the guy. It's directed by the guy who co-created Game of Thrones, and it's written by the guy who did Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and it's about these two metal kids in high school, and Chuck plays like the band leader.
I need to watch it.
He's good. He does a good job. His wife was saying it's the first time he's worn a blazer since their wedding, like 10 years ago. I read that you guys were not happy at all with the fidelity of this record. The recording?
That's not true. I think that the problem is that we learned a lot making that record. And that one of the things we learned was like, don't let it get mastered for $300 just to save some money. We took it up to a guy in Cleveland who's a very sweet guy, and he mastered it for us. But we needed the opposite of that. We needed to call the Greg Calby in on that one. But it was a big record for us, Magic Potion, because it was our first major label record. I think that we started becoming aware of the limitations of we had kind of pigeonholed ourselves by having the duo situation, and we were considering what we could do live way too much when we were in the studio, and not making songs based on what sounded best, And so we changed our approach big time right after that.
When did you guys first meet Danny McBride? I know he's he's an Ohio kid too, but was that the first introduction?
We met Danny in Los Angeles. I think it was at a Grammy party. The Kings of Leon were having a dinner, and it was Danny McBride was there, and Nick Swartzen was there, and that's when we met at one of those. We're such massive fans of comedians that's where we really fan out, is just being around David Cross, or right now we're way into Theo Vaughn.
Is this when the relationship with Brian Burton with Danger Mouse sort of really started, or how did you guys first encounter him?
You met him in LA, right?
Well, he reached out to us about he wanted us to write some songs and have Ike Turner sing them, and it was going to be an Ike Turner Return to Form album. So we started working on stuff and sending it to him, and then we first met him. We played Coachella. It feels like we played Coachella every year. Do you remember? We were just there all the time. We played there in 2007. Gnarls Barkley, I guess, performed. He had us over to his room, and we met him there. And then about a month later, I flew out to LA for just like a weekend trip, and I called him, and he met me at the Standard Hotel in LA. And without actually asking Dan first, I just asked him if he would consider like producing our record, and if we could just take these songs and do a Black Keys record, because I could see that the Ike thing was going to take like a year, and we needed to make music. And he said he'd be interested in it. So I called Dan. Dan was up for it, and we booked. Dan booked a studio in Ohio that he like wanted to work at, and that was that.
What does that do to bring in a third person after, however many years you guys have been, your 8 years into your recording career maybe, and also you've known each other 15 years probably at that point?
I think it was really healthy for us to do that, and I think that Brian was a great person to work with for the first time. Just we bonded over a lot of the same records. We had a lot of the same kind of like interests and in sounds and stuff like that. And he was really easy to work with. It was just, honestly, it was just a lot of fun.
It was so much fun working.
And it was really eye-opening too. I mean, he just has such an ear for music and for hooks and stuff like that. But I think he gave us a lot of confidence. You know what I mean? I think that we didn't even realize what we were capable of until we met Brian.
He was like hanging out with an older brother that we never had. Just like there's a lot of ball busting, and he taught us a lot. One of the things he taught me, the most important thing maybe he taught me, was right after. We'd known him for days, and we were in Ohio working on something. And there was an idea that we were working on, and I was like, maybe not so into it or something. And he pulled me outside and basically told me to shut the f*** up. Like, yeah, Pat, like, it's really helpful if you just shut your mouth and let me do what I'm doing, so you can see what it is like that I'm doing, and then you can tell me what this sucks. And I was like, okay, that's good advice.
When you're in the studio making Brothers, are either of you guys like, man, this is it, this is our breakout record? Do you feel that in the moment, like no skips, every song's a single, or does it feel the same?
I knew going into the studio to make Brothers that we needed to, let me put it this right, like Dan had just made his first solo record, and I had realized that like it was a very special opportunity for us to get to make music together, and that it could always go away. And I think there's emphasis on the pushing ourselves, and just we both had just turned like 30, and I think going on the road, Dan had a toddler then, and it was just like we had to kind of take it a little bit more seriously. And I think that we took a little bit more time with that record. We were a little bit more thoughtful about what we did promotion-wise. I went to LA with the manager. We basically asked Warner Brothers to step it up. We had made a lot of money for them off the syncs, and I'd never seen much promotional money spent on us. And I was really asking them to do some shit for us, and they did.
You did the record down at Muscle Shoals, right? But Muscle Shoals wasn't really a functioning studio at that point. And I had read somewhere you guys are literally just like in a Marriott in Alabama, which sounds a little bit haunted again. How was that down there?
Well, we wanted to get out of town to make a record. And so we wanted to maybe go to some sort of historical studio, something that was kind of inspiring. And we talked about going to Sam Phillips in Memphis for a long time. And then right at the last minute, basically, the guy that we were working with, Mark Neal, he switched on us and said that we should go to Muscle Shoals Sound, that it would be way better. He'd spoken to the owner, and it was all good. So we make the trip down. We rent a car, pack it full of stuff, go down, and we go in there, and it's basically exactly like being in Pat's basement when we first started. I mean, it was identical. It was like hard surfaces everywhere, no treatment, no instruments. It was dark,
nothing
dingy.
Literally
It
nothing
was
worked.
psycho.
It was psycho.
But there's something magical about that city, about that town. I don't know what it is, but it just drew it out of us. We just, as soon as we got there, we started recording and making songs, and it was flowing really easy.
The owner of the studio lived in the basement. Like we had Mark Neal, the engineer, brought in all the gear we used essentially, and I drove a car down from Akron with like some synthesizers and some of Dan's guitars and shit. It was like being in Akron, but even less to do, and we just worked the whole time. We would wake up, go directly there.
Yeah, the isolation was really good.
Yeah,
honestly.
No one stopped by. One person stopped by. It was our day-to-day manager. We called him and asked him to bring a harpsichord down, and we have been smoking this really like Alabama weed and
dirt weed.
That was actually really. I don't really.
As soon as we started smoking, we requested a harpsichord.
Yeah,
neither of us played the keyboard.
The weed was right because we were wanting to hear bass all the time. So the record just like Dan started every song with bass. We called a manager, this day-to-day guy, Ryan. We're like, we need a harpsichord, and we've been smoking weed. And he's a big stoner. So he's like, you're smoking weed now? Because I never really smoked weed. He's like, yeah, I'll bring down some weed that you'll like. He showed up the next day with a harpsichord and this weed called Trainwreck. And literally, I took one puff of it and just felt like my body and mind had parted ways with each other and spun me out. It was too much for me.
Was this your first SNL as a musical guest?
Yeah, we did SNL the first time on Brothers. We did it about 6 months after the record came out. We did it in January 2011. I think was Jim Carrey the host first time we played. But yeah, that was something that we wanted to do. SNL. We grew up watching it. It was a really big deal to get to do it. And there was a huge blizzard. We woke up on the day afterwards. We were supposed to fly to Australia in like a couple of days, and we both had realized that we needed to can the tour of Australia, go home. We just moved to Nashville. We just wanted to go back. We decided to start recording a new record. We just kept rolling. And then we ended up doing SNL that year again. I think we're one of the only people that's ever done SNL twice in the same year.
Did someone buy your drinks at the after party this time?
Yeah, the weird thing is like when you play SNL, I don't drink before I play, so by the time we showed up to the after party, everybody was trashed and we were stone cold sober. It's a little different scene.
This is the most co-write I think that Danger Mouse had done with you guys. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. We went into this one with the idea of, writing the songs with Brian, working on them from scratch, all with Brian. I recorded in LA for that one.
Brian had done one song off the Brothers. He did Tighten Up, which became our first successful radio single. He'd been talking to him and wanted to do another record with him. He had been telling us that he thought we should make something that's faster. And that was like the challenge. It was a big challenge for me as a drummer because I never really listened to much fast music. I mean, I guess I did, but I never played it. I always listened to drumming that's like halftime or I don't know. I essentially felt like I had to learn to play drums again. It was very frustrating at times. I think that we ended up learning a lot making that record. And we started focusing more on like melody and hooks, and it became less about groove, which Brothers is basically, it's a lot about groove, And I think our happy medium somewhere in the middle.
The Lonely Boy video you guys had been really unhappy with, right? And that's how you ended up with Derek by himself in it. You shot something a lot more elaborate.
Yeah, we actually spent a couple days shooting an entire video with different locations and different actors. One of the main actors was Bob Odenkirk. And You know, it was this huge production. And then we got the final take of the video, and it was just a stinker, really. But we remembered being there when they recorded Derek dancing, and he just had the entire place cracking up. And so we asked to see that footage, and ultimately we just kind of made this gut decision because it was just the most entertaining thing. And
it was one take.
It was one take, you know what I mean? It was so special. I love that moment. And I love Derek too. He's really genuinely a nice person.
Yeah, I message with Derek probably about once a week. And honestly, we spent like $85,000 on that video.
For one shot.
Like literally for one shot. I'm not sure who. I'm not sure if it was the Jesse or the director or someone at the label, but I do remember getting like a manifesto about how we should not release the video as just Derek dancing. And it was a kind of a debate. And Dan was adamant about it, and it was the right call. I think it's got like 130 million YouTube views or something.
You guys had done sessions in LA and Nashville and stuff, and then how did you end up? The Mike Tyson thing was sort of a random. Was that like a quid pro quo or a favor?
No, I think we were just thinking about like when we announced Brothers or El Camino. We announced with we put an ad in the Akron Beacon Journal for a used minivan, and a couple people had actually figured it out. So we were just trying to do like something fun, and like at the time that seemed very random to have Mike Tyson like tweet out a link that Eric Wareheim directed really creepy promo. But you know, I think one thing we learned about some of this promo stuff is that you can't be too, you know, sometimes you need to be a little more forward, and that might have been one of those examples.
Was there anything that the label didn't let you do, promo-wise, that you regret?
No, we're allowed to do. We get full freedom to do whatever we want to do. Every bad idea is our own problem.
Our own doing.
At one point, we were really doing some serious prank call stuff that we should have done more with. Actually, the last time we played SNL was on Turn Blue. It was almost 8 years ago to the day. I didn't want to go out. Like, I didn't want to go out the night before because I didn't want to, like, stay out too late. So I stayed in my hotel room at the Bowery, and I just made a bunch of prank calls. Some of them were really amazing. I was prank calling KFCs, saying that I was a secret taster and that I could only detect 10 herbs and spices. And then I would call back, and I was like, "Did you just get a call from corporate?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "That's actually someone from Popeyes. We ignore what they just said. We're like, we're one step behind them all day."
Let's Rock is your longest hiatus, right? That's like 4 or 5 years. You guys were at that point, I guess you were both just pretty burnt from touring, basically.
Well, when Brothers came out and in May of 2010, and we'd actually been on tour that whole April of that month, and we did South by Southwest that month. We basically toured from March of 2010 straight through till that SNL. Then we went right in the studio, and then we went and we did Coachella 2011. We did a European run. We did Bonnaroo. We did a Canadian run. We did promo tour straight into a world tour all 2012. We went into the studio in 2013. Plus, we did more touring in the U.S., more studio, straight into Turn Blue. It was just another world tour. By the time early 2015 happened, I broke my shoulder, causing us to like cancel a bunch of dates, which is probably a very good thing because we were fried already. We had some European stuff that summer. We had some U.S. stuff, and we did it. And then Dan did the Arcs. He did a solo record, and we took 2016 and 2017 off. I think we only maybe even chatted like once in 2017 or 16. we were just really giving each other space. And then around early mid 2018, we made plans to make another record. So we really took 2 years off. Went into 2018 and we started making Let's Rock, and that was our first time in the studio together in 5 years. But really, most importantly, it was our first time in the studio without a producer in a long time. And that's how the band started. That's what the band is. So it took us a minute to get things back. It wasn't like a struggle making that record, but just finding the point of view, and I think that really, like, the record is like Magic Potion to me. It was like a transitional record, It's like I think Will has one of our best songs. We just played it the other day. It feels amazing. But when I think about that time, 2018, 2019, it's now Delta Cream that seems the most important. Making that record here at Easy High, I think it reset our minds. It just let us see like how simplistic it can be to make something that's really enjoyable, and that things should come from that space. And I'm thinking about that Beck record, Odelay, just about how fun that record is, how vibey it is. I think that like a good record that should come through that type of energy. I think that like El Camino definitely has that, and I think if you listen to Brothers, there's definitely this heavy vibe on it. It's not like a party record necessarily, but it is. I don't know. There's something about that. So I think Dropout Boogie does that too.
Is it super expensive to get a William Eggleston photo for an album cover?
We thought it would be impossible.
It's priceless
to us. We're such huge fans of William Eggleston, and
he's our favorite photographer for sure.
Yeah.
And Dan was like, we should get an Eggleston photo for this.
Yeah, and it was just like, but we reached out.
I kept telling him, like, we could never afford it. We could never afford it.
Dude, yeah. We don't want to pay that much money for a photo. And we reached out, and our manager explained to them what the record was and who was on it. And it was a tribute to these northern Mississippi musicians. And this is where a lot of Eggleston's photos were taken. And they just loved the idea of the project, and they just let us have the photo.
We know his daughter, Andra, and she's always been very cool to us. So I think that helped.
Had you guys met Billy Gibbons before? I have to imagine you'd had multiple encounters with.
We'd met Billy Gibbons a couple times before he came by the studio. We actually jammed with him in Malibu at Rick Rubin's studio years ago.
That's a lot of beards in one room.
He came to, Billy Gibbons came to one of our shows early on when we were on the Rubber Factory tour. We played Santa Fe, and it was like, that was a bleak ass tour. A lot of these early tours were pretty bleak in the van, but that tour was really hard because we were on tour with this husband-wife combo where she did front of house and quote unquote tour managed, and her burnout boyfriend sold the merch, and they just fought the whole time and smoked hashish. It was completely insane.
Nonsense.
And we were so miserable. And on top of that, I was just fighting with my girlfriend the whole time because getting guilt tripped for being on the road. It should have been so much fun. We were 24 years old on tour in a rock band, and here we are miserable. Well, we played this show in Santa Fe, and after we got off stage, we're like, Billy Gibbons is here. We're like, oh, shit, he didn't stay to say hi. Fuck. The next time we ended up actually meeting him, he came to see us in Columbus, and his manager had called and had instructed us to stop at Skyline Chili and bring him cans of Skyline Chili.
What is happening on the album cover for Dropout Boogie, and what is the title? Tell me a little bit about that.
What is happening?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Are you smelting or like melting? I can't tell.
The title's a reference to The Captain Beefheart song off of
Oh,
Safe as Milk, which is
a record that we bonded on over early on when we were on tour together, just the two of us. That was one of the records we just kept coming back to.
We would listen to it all the time. And when we were on, we took kind of I guess they would call it a heroic dose of psychedelic mushrooms once on tour. And that was the song that came on that scared the living out of us. And the song after it was what we ended up covering, but much sweeter song. I think that we were talking. Dan's daughter's in high school. My stepdaughter is in high school. And while we were making this record, Dropout Boogie, we did it last summer over here at Dan's studio, and it was so much fun. I'd been like completely isolated during the pandemic, like very low, no male energy except for my 3-year-old boy. It was just me,
lunatic,
and just a lot of women at my house. And so getting to come over to Dan's studio and hang out, we were just joking around like the whole time. And one of the things we were talking about was just we had this concept for a music video that was like, actually, we were talking about, we went to high school together, so we were talking about our high school experience and how insane it was, like kids getting thrown through trophy cases and like absolute madness, and versus like what our kids are experiencing.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to kind of do like a video that was like not mocking today's high school students, but maybe like trying to show what kind of trouble they could get into or something. And a fun video. And Dan, I was like, yeah, we can play the teachers and the guidance counselor. And Dan's like, no, man, we dropped out of school. We'd have to be like the janitor and the stuff. But Dan had become friends with this photographer, Jim Harrington, who has been takes amazing portraits, and a lot of them feel like a lot of those. What's that photographer's name?
I can't remember, but Jim was sending us these photos of these turn of the century portraits of workers, like factory workers, bakers, custodians, and we just loved how they looked, and so we tried to put that together like that. And then we tied it in with the video, which is the first time we've ever done anything like that. But it was fun.
Last question, since you do have 2 teenagers, do your kids think you're cool or not at all?
Hell no. My daughter's 14. She shakes her head at me all the time, every day.
I think Dan has a soon-to-be 7-year-old boy. I can tell he thinks his dad's cool, and I think my son thinks I'm cool too. But when they get to be 16, they won't think that anymore.
Well, that was awesome. This has been EW Stories Behind the Songs. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Dan and Pat from the Black Keys.
Of course.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Care.